This is the Christian Circle podcast, and you're listening to Pamela Fernandez, where we have conversations about Christian living. Here's the show. So, welcome to a new episode of the Christian Circle podcast. Today, we have a new guest who's going to talk to us about Christian unity. And we have Mr. Hanael Bianchi, and I think I'm messing that up. But Hanael, tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry today.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on. And you got it pretty much exactly right, Hanael Bianchi. And I am a really committed Catholic Christian. And my ministry with the church has mainly been through men's ministry recently. So I've been leading the parish's men's ministry for the last 8 years. And before that, I was really involved in young adult ministry. I'm married. I have 4 kids now. And I'm also a historian of my PhD in history. And I've been teaching history at a 2-year school in Maryland for the last 16 years. And I think how that academic background relates to today's conversation, maybe there's a little bit of information that might be useful. Academically, I'm really interested in the process of secularization. So I wrote my dissertation looking at the calendar in particular and how it became more secular. It used to be a religious document, and then the state got control of it. Now corporations got control of it. And then I've been after that, I was like, what is the impact of secularization on our culture? Mm-hmm. And initially, I was writing a lot about boredom and how actually we lost our purpose in society, and so we were like bored. And then I kind of transitioned to another topic, which I was like, we don't have like these moral laws so much. And the impact was that we've become very addicted. And then recently, I've been really intrigued by the fact that we've lost the unifying principle of religion. And what's the result of that is that we're divided. And so when you ask us, what's the impact of secular society on our culture, I would say we're bored, we're addicted, and we're divided. I think it's that last topic that we're gonna talk about today. So that's a little bit about my background and how kind of relevant for the topic of today.
So you actually wrote a post about a Catholic call for unity, and that's where I found you. And now it's Thanksgiving time, everybody's coming together, but it's not such a unifying time. Times have changed. So why exactly are we not united, despite the fact that more and more people are coming to Jesus? I mean, 40,000 Catholics were baptized this year, confirmed, joined the Catholic Church this year in the United States alone. So the Catholic Church is growing, Christians are coming to Jesus, but we are not more united. Why?
That's an excellent question. Now, so I have to really look at that second part of the question first. More and more people come to Jesus, more people becoming Catholic, more people becoming Christian. And I'm studying secularization. And one thing that's interesting is that atheists and social scientists have been predicting the end of religion for decades. They keep on saying religion's going to end, religion's going to end. And it's really persistent. Like, we're really persistent. It's hard to get rid of us. And there's lots of reasons for that. And I could go that, but it's another conversation for another day. So it is actually worldwide, religion is growing. But the one thing that intrigued me is that numbers don't tell the whole truth. Okay. And here's what I'm getting to is that maybe what it means to be if somebody surveys you and asks you, what are you? And you say, I'm a Christian, or I'm a Catholic, or I'm a Baptist. Maybe that's changed over the last couple hundred years. And that's what I argue in a lot of my research is that what it means to be a Christian has changed. Okay. And people are actually thinking differently. They're not thinking like Christians. And the best example of this is, our politicians. So you have, all our politicians are mainly Christians. We have, even if you boil down to like a particular denomination, like Catholicism, you have, Nancy Pelosi, you have Joe Biden, and you also have Catholics like Ron DeSantis, they're completely on the opposite sides of the spectrum. Yeah. So the reality is that when you'd make an assumption that people are unified because they're Christian or a particular denomination, that's not true. They are nominally Christian, but they're thinking more in terms of their ideology. And there's a conflict between their religion and their party beliefs or their ideology, they defer to that and not to the
Okay.
religion. So they're not putting Jesus first. They're not putting their religious beliefs first. They're
Mm.
actually putting these different political ideologies that are divisive. And
Mm.
so, even though more people are becoming Christian, we're becoming liberal Christians or conservative Christians. There's all these different brands of
Yeah.
Christianity,
Mhm.
and they're a liberal first or conservative first, and then Christianity or Jesus, God, whatever, doesn't become second, third, fourth, fifth, or whatever. It's something in the background that they ascribe to those beliefs when it's convenient. So the
Mm.
answer to your question why there's more and more Christians, but we're more divided, is because we're not authentically,
Mm.
fully Christian, not fully following the full gospel message, just when it's conducive to their ideology. And
Mm.
so, sadly, even though all our leaders are Christian,
Mm.
um, they don't really ascribe to all of it, and they hold on to their ideologies that are actually dividing them.
Mm. So we are actually more divided now than we have ever been, politically, economically, based on class, based on race, based on philosophies. The problem is now we are also divided in church over all these matters, these very same matters. And why are we not able to rise above this? Why can't we, be like the early Christian church that was practicing a different brand of Jesus culture altogether?
Okay, so I'm going to get into this concept that I kind of been saying a lot myself in my classes, and I'm hearing it a lot in the news, that we seem to be more divided now than ever before. As a historian, I kind of have to qualify that because, if you go back 200 years ago with racism, I mean, there was slavery in the United States, and 100 years ago, there was Jim Crow laws where there was segregation.
Mm.
So we've made some improvements.
Mhm.
And, a couple hundred years ago, if you used to insult somebody, they would like, threaten you with a duel or challenge you to a duel, and then and then somebody might get killed. I mean, people have always been kind of divided, but it's true. I think it seems like we're more divided, or it appears that we really feel like we're more divided now than ever before, definitely in my lifetime. And the
Mm.
question is, why do we feel so divided now? And why can't we rise above it? Like, why can't, as Christians, can't we come above it?
Mm.
And it's something that's really intrigued me now is not so much the kind of the division, but how it's portrayed. And I think you have to look at the media. First
Mm.
of all, online.
Yeah.
I know so many people that are of different political ideologies, and in person, they're incredibly nice. I see them on Monday and they ask about like my family and how was the weekend. And these people are so nice. And then you see the online personality. And I'm so saddened sometimes when you see them online and they're so angry or just petty.
Yeah.
And even with church leaders that I really admired, some church intellectuals that are really well-known Christians, and then I see them on social media and they're just, it's they're being drawn down into the muck.
Mm.
And so there's this online kind of like divisive kind of fighting back and forth that really wasn't around 20 years ago. And
Yeah.
so this feeling that we're constantly divided because we're not interacting face to face, but in the online format, which is just a lot of anger out there. And the
Mm.
same thing with the news. There's this 24 news cycle, which there's not enough news for 24 hours a day. They have to
Yeah.
make up news. And what they've realized is that division sells.
Mm.
And you see this in the secular media. And I follow Christian and Catholic media a lot. Unfortunately, I have to take a step back because I get this, I'm being drawn down. And it's a lot of times it's not uplifting. It's a lot of times it's
Yeah.
divisive. And
Yeah.
so and even when I write my own blogs, I know that if I write something really inspirational about prayer,
Mm.
not that many people share it or comment.
Yeah.
And then when you do something that's a little bit more like edgy,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's more, and so we get, this is the problem, I think, that we're all kind of we're kind of shackled
Mm.
if in this culture by the new forms of media and how they're promoting this and how and there's the online world in many ways. It just feels like even though we've made improvements economically with more, we're actually, poor people today are doing much better than they were in like doing the Industrial Revolution or even doing, the Middle Ages, or whatever, the gaps and racially things have improved. We just feel like everybody's angry but at everybody else because of the online environment, because of the news cycle, and because of the lack of civility too that you
Mm,
see in the political parties and the
yeah.
debates and all that. So we're being I think Christians are being kind of like being pulled down, and we really
Mm.
have to resist that. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why we're struggling to rise above this unprecedented level of kind of division.
Now it's Thanksgiving time, right? We all, for a couple of days, everyone will get together, be nice and be thankful. And then the next 2 days later, they're going to go back to what they originally were doing, whether online, whether offline, with their original divisions. What steps can we take in our church, especially, to promote this unity, to go back to our original roots of what Christianity really was?
Okay, so I'm. This is now we're gonna switch a little bit from talking about why the reasons why everything's divided, and I think like what steps can we take to improve? And I'm gonna kind of go from my last comments forward here. And if I was, a pastor, if I was preaching in a congregation, what would I tell them? Or if, in a forum like this, what am I telling people? I definitely am involved in men's ministry. What am I telling the men in my ministry? And it's the number one step is really, there's like a two kind of phase step that I would tell people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Number one thing is just to unplug.
Mm,
Unplug. You can
yeah.
make 95% of all the division that you're anxious about disappear by
Mm,
just unplugging. I do
yeah.
our men's group does like a yearly program for 90 days where we unplug from all electronic use outside of work, and
Wow.
it's amazing. Everything just disappears,
Mm,
and you feel so much more at peace.
mm,
And then the second step of it is like, and you know this, every time you go online and you go on to like Twitter or TikTok or anything, you always, afterwards, you feel angry. Afterwards, you feel upset. You just feel like you've wasted time.
yeah.
And then I'm going to contrast that with the experience of like what are a small group. And this is maybe going back to your question of like the early Christian community, like the small group, men's group in our parish. We meet, we discuss, the Bible, we pray with each other. And if we, after a weekly meeting, almost, no, it's not almost, it's 100% of the time, you feel at peace. You
Mm,
feel unity. You feel that love
mm,
between your brothers. And so that's what you really need to focus on and realize that this is a true meaningful relationships is two-way in person with the people in front of you, right? And
yeah.
and that's really how you're gonna build unity and bonds and unite your congregation. So step one is unplug. Step two is really encounter the people that are around you and share this in like this meaningful kind of relationships, and it's truly amazing. Now I'll just go on for one other further point on this, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, is through reading some of the spiritual craft classics, in particular Spiritual Combat by Duns Scappoli, is who is your enemy? Who is your
Mm,
Okay. And
yeah.
so a lot of people think that they're in tribes, like you've heard probably like this
Yeah.
tribalism in America, and that I'm part of a particular tribe and my enemy is this other tribe. And that
Mm,
is not a Christian view.
mm,
That is, we are called to like love everybody, right?
yes. Yeah.
All right. Love the other. They're not our enemies. They might see us as their enemy, but we are not, we don't see them as our enemy. So
Mm,
who is our enemy? And then so like a lot of people would say like the devil is our enemy, but the devil's pretty weak, can't actually make us do anything.
yeah.
He can tempt, but the only person that can actually make us sin, or the only person that really can force us to turn away from God, is ourselves.
Yeah.
And this concept that my principal enemy is myself, and not like I'm schizophrenic that I have two persons, but there's
Mhm.
certain aspects of me, particularly what they call like your passions, your emotions, or your appetites, or your inclinations, which are trying to seize control of you, and those are your enemies that you're fighting. All right. And so the fundamental question is, for in this topic, let's say anger. is anger controlling me, or am I controlling my anger? And that's
Mm,
your principal battle. It's like you're fighting that internal battle to be a holy person, to align your will to the will of God, and to be motivated by love for God. And that's your principal battle. Your principal battle is not to fight other people, right?
mm,
So I think a lot of people have this misconception that they get really angry when they see something and they're like, I need to do something. They're
yeah.
motivated by anger, and like
Mm,
they think it's a righteous anger, but the reality is your only true motivation for a Christian should be love of God. It's really
mm,
that love. And you
yeah.
can have anger, that's 100% natural to have
Mm,
anger, but that cannot be your motivating factor. If
mm,
that is your motivating factor, you will be manipulated into these tribes, where you're doing battle with other people. So really, what are you preaching? Like, in now Thanksgiving and the post Thanksgiving, as we think about community and unity, it's number one, especially in from Thanksgiving now going into also Advent and the Christmas season. Just my number one advice is unplug your life. Okay, you're not doing anything to like really with the social media. Now I
mm,
listen, actually I do podcast like studio curiosity, which is like the TikTok and the Facebook and the Twitter.
yeah.
That's a sin. But is being studious, which is like, I listen to courses on YouTube and podcasts where I really learn from
Mm,
people. And being studious is a virtue and learning. So you can do that, but unplug from the curiosity, like the scrolling through
mm,
Facebook and text. Unplug from that, and you can be studious, but also really spend time with those people around you and form
yeah.
those loving relationships. And then the third point here, which I mentioned, is that your enemy aren't other people,
Mm,
right? This is the gospel message of Jesus. You're not fighting it. You're looking inward as your enemy, and you
mm,
want to have this personal struggle to improve your life, and to align your will with the will of God. That's your battle. That's your struggle, and that's if you can master that, um, then you're on your way to holiness. Not fighting other people. So
mm,
drop the fight against other people. Just don't think you need to. There's this divide, and you need to fight other people to win. No, focus in on your own personal growth. So it's kind of interesting. How do you unify people? Many of the ways is actually it starts with an individual a
yeah.
choice, right?
Yeah.
Rather than thinking about like, it starts with a lot of people making individual choices rather than trying to get everybody to do one thing at once. So that individual growth is, I think, an important aspect for each person. Because I know I'm gone too long, but um, uh, if I'll say one more point is like when we're unified, we always blame the other side for causing division.
Mm,
And then you say, look over there and say, those people are causing the division. And those
mm,
people like say, those people, you're causing the division. The reality is you can't change other people. You can only change yourself.
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's where we need to start by
Mhm,
saying, I'm going to change. I'm going to be the mechanism of change.
mhm. So this concept would work really well for Christians in a sense because they understand that, other people have a soul, that we are being called to love others just as God is unconditionally loving us. But for people who are not really Christian, for people who don't have this concept of love, for people whose concept of God is if you do something, I will do something in return. How do you unite these people together with the Christian people altogether?
Okay, that's a great and a tough question. And now as I'm thinking about it, I'm not going to be able to give really a satisfactory like answer to it
Mhm.
completely.
Yeah.
And it actually might be like even a strange answer, because when you think about unity, because I started off by saying, we're divided because we don't have a principle to unify us.
Mhm.
And if you could just do an example, like I'm a Bianchi, I'm united to everybody in my family because we're Bianchis. That's what brings us together.
Mhm.
Everybody in the United States is united because we're Americans. So there's got to be some sort of unified principle. So
Mm.
you can't just say, let's all be unified for the sake of unity. That never really works. That was actually a big movement in after World War II, after the World War, particularly in the 1960s, there was this big movement amongst the churches to kind of unify for the sake of
Mhm.
unity. And it didn't work because there wasn't something that binded them together. So you need
Mhm.
some sort of principle to kind of like bind you together, And like you mentioned, it's easy for Christians because we're unified on the person of Jesus, right? And
Mhm.
that's a
Yeah.
strong bond. That's my central bond. If you are a Christian, you're closer to me than you are to even my family members that are not Christian, because
Mm.
it's the most principal thing in my life. And if I
Yeah.
bump into you and you say you're Christian, I'm saying I'm Christian, I might have not known you, but I feel this intense union. But
Yeah.
the reverse side of that is like I'm unified. If I go back to my previous example of like the Bianchis being unified,
Mm.
um, it means that it excludes everybody that's not a Bianchi from that family bond. And the national bond is kind of similar. If you're not American, you're excluded from that. And so there's also something saying that that strong bond as Christian also excludes people that aren't Christian. So
Mm.
this is I have not even started to answer your question, but just to say is that Jesus did say that he did come to bring division, and that's like a strange thing for him to say. But he knew that when he brought people together as Christians, that people would reject him, and that
Mm.
there would be persecution. Actually, now here, so that's the fundamental disappointing answer. But then I've got a little bit more of an optimistic follow up. So there is people that are not Christian. There's always going to be some sort of divide, right? You,
Yeah.
but here is something that is beautiful about Christianity, the gospel message, Jesus, and that I just truly love. Because every well, not every, but a lot of unifying forces, if you look at nationalism or political ideologies or even class conflict, there's always tension with the other, right? So you're unified by some principle and you kind of reject the other people. So if you think about nationalism, I'm American, but I'm not going to be German, and you kind of
Yeah.
had that divide. But Christians, we're united as Christians, but we look at non Christians and we love them just
Mm.
as much or even more than we love the Christians. Yes, there's something missing there, that bond, but
Mm.
we don't have any hatred or negative feelings for them. So there's still a unity there of they're a creature created by God. Now they
Mm.
don't share in baptism, and they're not united with us in faith, but we still see their infinite value as human beings, as having a soul and being loved by God. And so from us, we are going to show them love. And that's a beautiful message that makes Christianity distinct from all these other divisive ideologies. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of people hungry for that
Yeah.
because they're dissatisfied with the Republicans. They're dissatisfied with the Democrats, right? They're
Yeah.
dissatisfied with the national conversation, what's so divisive. And if we offered like a third alternative way of seeing the world, which we have as Christians, that we rise above that divisiveness that I said that we're kind of shackled down and offer this new vision that that Christianity has to offer, people are hungry for that.
Mm.
So can we all be united? Unfortunately, no, because when God created us, he created us with free will. And
Mm.
that same act that gave us the possibility to love also gave the possibility that there would be rejection and hatred.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be some people that do not take what God offers and they're actually going to divide themselves away. But
Okay.
from our perspective, there's still this universal unity with every human being that we acknowledge that every single one of them has infinite value and that we will love them unconditionally, whether or not they are Christian. And that's as um, um, like I said, it's the best as we can get, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be still some tension, but I think that you can still be divided on principles and still treat each other with love and civility. So that's where people think different, but our hearts can still be united through love. So um, it's even though it's kind of like a slightly unsatisfying answer because you never want to water down Christianity and say
Yeah.
everybody's welcome. It doesn't matter if you don't believe in Jesus. Yeah, that's fine. You can become into our churches and no, we can't water it down. We have to hold up our principles as
Yeah.
Christians, but we still have to keep that attitude of love towards them.
Hmm. So if there was one take-home message that you would say, especially since it's Thanksgiving time right now, one thing that you would tell people, this is what you can do to unify. what would it be? One verse or whatever it is to dwell on, one takeaway message.
So I think that it's an individual call.
Mm,
So if you're going to Thanksgiving and there's, you know, family members that you disagree with, that you don't get along with, never ever let it enter your mind, right?
mm,
That it's their fault, like they're the ones to blame, and you're not going to do anything about it. You go in there with like, how can I improve the situation? How can I be as kind and as charitable
mm,
possible? And so turn it in on you into that individual, your own path. And that, for me, my verse this year, which maybe not related, is like, you want to be my disciples. Jesus says you
mm.
have to do three things. You have to deny yourself, pick
Yes.
up your cross, and follow him. So it's
Yeah.
an individual call, and
Yeah.
sometimes that means that people are going to say things that aren't nice to you.
Yeah.
But deny yourself. There's like, I don't need this. I'm not, and I'm going to take up my cross. I'm going to follow Jesus, and I'm going to try to be the best person. It doesn't matter if other people are going to be mean or divisive. I myself am going to commit to being charitable and loving towards everyone. So again, direct the attention for change to yourself. That's the takeaway.
Okay, great. So that's some great advice. So thank you so much, Haniel, for talking to us about this. And at such short notice, just before the holidays, I'm really, really grateful. So tell people where they can find you online and where they can read more about you or get in touch with you.
Yeah, so I've taken a little bit of a break from blogs, but it is a blog called Fertile
Mhm.
Soil, and it's at the Catholic Review. It's the Archdiocesan newspaper news organization for Baltimore. And I would say that one thing on there's some academic things, but the one thing that on Amazon would be interesting. It's very short. It's like $3. Is a just a two week program looking at spiritual combat, and it's called Spiritual Combat Boot Camp. And so it's a 14-day kind of summary that I wrote for the men's group, to go through and look how to jumpstart your spiritual life. I think that's the most practical, just for everyday. It's Christians. There's one chapter that's really focused towards Catholics, which is based on the Eucharist. But for the rest of it, it's general information on how to really jumpstart your spiritual life.
Great, great. So thank you so much, Haniel, for talking to us and for sharing all your wonderful tips. I wish you a happy Thanksgiving and all the very best.
Oh, thank you so much, and I really appreciate you inviting me to come on here and talk.